Libby's got a technique that sounds very similar to Sally's, and she produces our pavlovas at Christmas time, and we're all beating each other to have the last bit.
What kind of fruit are you putting on top?
Of the pavlova?
Yeah, kiwi fruit, strawberries, cherries?
No, berries. Mostly.
Very nice. Penny, do you have a question?
My question is, what else can you use instead of cream? Because I hate cream. Cream is gross. It's like sucking butter. I can't stand cream.
Oh.
So what else would you use? Honestly, I'm like, hate trifle. That stuff is yuck. And Christmas cake. So yeah, I'm ice cream and strawberries.
This is a problem.
I would probably put lemon curd on top.
Oh no, that would be. Sweet. That would be.
I wanted to talk about a companion thing. If you're making a pavlova, you've got to have a companion dessert or a thing, so for your egg yolks. Because otherwise you're just going to waste your egg yolks. So
Love
you
it.
do lemon curd
So
or
what do you do?
What would it be?
I always make a companion tiramisu.
I like tiramisu.
There you go. It's got cream in it.
I know. I'm not consistent, all right? I'm not consistent.
That's all right.
Am I hearing Christmas at Sally's? Yes, I am.
We're going to have Christmas in our hotel this year. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
No dishes.
Christmas at Sally's. Sally Ward, thanks for inviting me. I'll see you Christmas Day. Meanwhile,
I'll be on holiday, Wallace, away from you.
Okay,
Yes.
fair enough. Gary Moore, Penny Ashton,
Thanks.
see you later.
See ya.
Thank you.
Tracy Chapman taking you out.
Be someone, be someone.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Our haere aki nei, over-the-counter cold meds with pseudoephedrine are coming back, and there's concern more pea houses and burglaries will follow. A pharmacist joins us live. The Israel Hamas ceasefire is due to end in about an hour. What will that mean for the people of Gaza and the remaining hostages? We cross to an aid agency. Dozens of people are lucky to be alive after a fire guts part of a Mangare church complex. Accusations of blackmail and fit shaming over a popular North Shore walkway. The jailbirds that went over the wire prompting a security review. Doc is here with the details, and we stretch ourselves with a yarn about a baby giraffe. High levels of cuteness.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Anna Thomas. 4 families in the Auckland suburb of Mangare Bridge are lucky to be alive after their homes were razed to the ground. Fire and Emergency says the buildings did not have smoke alarms or sprinklers, and the fire looks to be the cause of an electrical fault. Emma Stanford reports.
There were 40 people in the scorched buildings on Coronation Road last night and will have to stay at their church for the night. 14 fire and emergency crews went to the scene just before 3 this morning to find flames burning through multiple buildings on land owned by the Akoteo Whakakalisi Tiane Ko Namoa Church. Given the age of the buildings, there were concerns of asbestos being released into the air, but tests have since found no sign of the deadly particle. Fire and Emergency completely extinguished the fire this morning.
An Auckland man has been charged with manslaughter after a car struck a pregnant woman during an illegal street race and her baby later died. Police say the woman who was watching the race in East Tamaki in May was taken to hospital for emergency surgery. They say the 22-year-old man is already before the Manukau District Court on multiple driving offences. Protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza are gathering outside the Port of Auckland this afternoon. This comes after a similar protest last week in which 7 people were arrested. Felix Walton has more.
Protesters are gathering at the port's entrance from 5 o'clock to protest the importing of goods sold by Israeli companies. They're calling for boycotts and sanctions on all businesses with connections to Israel. Police say they'll maintain a presence at the entrance to the port on Solent Street. They say they recognise the lawful right to protest, but also want to protect the rights of port workers to go about their business. Organising groups Action for Palestine and Student Justice for Palestine have posted on social media to call for non-violence during the protest.
The Wellington Chamber of Commerce says redundancies at Weta Digital will be a loss for the city. US-based tech firm Unity Software has announced it will be severing its agreement with Weta Digital as it looks to reduce its workforce, resulting in 265 redundancies. Chamber Chief Executive Simon Arcus says Wellington has been making a name for itself in tech.
We want to keep promoting that, want to keep that talent in the city. And it's a low-carbon, environmentally friendly kind of a role, and it brings in a good deal of revenue for the city and talented people.
Simon Arcus says they are concerned about the jobs, most of which boast significant salaries going offshore. An international counter-terrorism expert believes police had no choice but to take the Christchurch terror attack gunman's claims of multiple shooters seriously. Two experts provided evidence via audio-visual link during today's proceedings into the inquest into the 51 deaths of the 2019 mosque attacks. They were asked about false information the gunman gave police upon arrest. Counter-terrorism expert Scott Wilson said police needed to take the reports at face value. Mr. Wilson said if they didn't take it seriously, it would open them up for criticism later. A hugely influential former American Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died. Dr. Kissinger played a leading role in US foreign relations and worked for Presidents Nixon and Ford. He trumped human rights by focusing on national self-interest and gained notoriety from the secret bombing of Cambodia.
No nation can make its survival dependent on the goodwill of another state, especially of a state that announces a hostile ideology.
Dr. Kissinger became a global celebrity and popularised the phrase, "Power is the ultimate aphrodisiac." He was 100 years old. To sport now, and New Zealand are inching closer to Bangladesh's first innings total of 310 on day 3 of the first cricket test in Sylhet, resuming 266 for 8, needing a further 45 runs to take a first innings lead. New Zealand a short time ago were 280 for 8, 30 runs in arrears. Skipper Tim Southey was on 10 and Kyle Jamieson 12. Wellington Phoenix midfielder Chloe Knott has terminated her contract with the A-League Football Club, citing the financial pressures of full-time work and playing professionally. Knott, who's played in every one of the Phoenix Women's A-League games, says she realised she had to put her football career on hold when she found the joy of playing was no longer outweighing the financial strain she was under. Phoenix coach Paul Temple says many of his players are juggling jobs and football.
Ultimately, the wages that we're paying across the league, this is not just the Phoenix, they're not earning enough money for what we're asking them to do. So hopefully we can push towards raising the salaries, raising the cap, raising the bar, just to pay these athletes more money so it can be more sustainable for them.
Meanwhile, Arsenal is through to the top 16 of the Football Champions League after trouncing French club Lens 6-0. Manchester United's hopes of advancing, though, have suffered a setback with a 3-3 draw with Galatasaray. Gymnastics coaches will reportedly no longer be permitted to weigh young athletes under new British gymnastics rules aimed to end practices the Federation says are on the fringes of abuse. And that's the news.
Green MP Julianne Genter calls out a double standard.
We've had male politicians who are regularly drunk in public for decades and who never get any sort of criticism for it.
Air New Zealand has new snack options.
Snackachangi vinegar and salt chips, Molly Whoppy white chocolate coated ginger biscuits, Dr. Bug's lemon meringue pie popcorn treats.
And it's been 40 years of Now That's What I Call Music.
EMI were put in a very difficult position where Queen and Paul McCartney both wanted to be track 1, side 1.
Now that's what I call news. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Mid-Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taumaranui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Partly cloudy, possible shower in Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui tomorrow afternoon or evening. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, cloudy periods with isolated showers. Taranaki to Kapiti Coast, partly cloudy with isolated showers inland. Becoming fine tomorrow afternoon. Wellington and Wairarapa mainly fine, but cloud increasing tomorrow with a few morning showers. Nelson, Buller and Westland mainly fine apart from cloudy periods about Westland. Canterbury and Marlborough, cloudy at times, isolated showers turning to rain for a time this evening. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods with a few showers. And for the Chatham Islands, often cloudy with a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 5:07 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Nā mihi ana, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A pharmacist fears bringing back over-the-counter cold medicines containing pseudoephedrine, an ingredient used to make meth, will see the return of pea houses and chemist shop burglaries. Loosening the rules around pseudo is an ACT policy agreed to by National in its coalition deal, and it's part of the new government's 100-day work programme. The drug has been prescription only since 2011, a policy introduced by the National Prime Minister of the day, John Key, who was concerned about backyard cooks and gangs using it to make meth or pea. Joining us now is Mangare pharmacist Lanny Wong. Hi, Lanny.
Oh, kia ora, Lisa.
What do you think will happen if this over-the-counter cold meds with pseudo come back on the shelves?
Yeah, I think, we can look at what's happened before and sort of go from there. So when it was available, I can remember, many pharmacies that I worked at, I always worry about break-ins and theft, and certainly remember having to ID people and having to refuse sale to people that I suspect that are purchasing it to make pea or on-selling to dealers to make pea. And it's a very uncomfortable and unsafe situation for pharmacists to be in. Certainly I can remember an incident where there was a pharmacist in, I think, Mount Albert, who had a struggle with a break-in, and that person, the pharmacist was fine, but that person who broke into the store unfortunately died on the scene, and that was quite a tragic situation. It certainly made headline news then. And I think, for some of your landlord listeners, they might remember the days where they had to screen tenants for to see whether they're making pea or, to clean up their property because it's been used as a pea lab. So, I think we can confidently say we would see a bit of return in that if, people can source the precursor pseudoephedrine for pea locally. So you've seen more sort of DIY job, if you like, yeah.
Is it worth it then to bring it back as an over-the-counter med?
Oh, look, there's definitely been mixed feedback from my pharmacist colleagues. Certainly, I can say, pseudoephedrine is an effective product. We all can agree about that. I think, it is effective, but, the condition it's treating from a health perspective is relatively minor. Cold and flu is a self-limiting condition. We need to really think about the balance between benefit and harm. And that's how we think about it through medicine. So I think, pharmacists will have to make a really conscious decision about what to do. Like, we're all very caring people, and the way I decide what to sell in my shop is, I look at the need of my community. So if my community wants it, I will stock it. But if it becomes, a danger and there are P labs starting in my community, or, there's risk of break-in or putting my staff at risk of hold-ups and things like that, then I have to make that tough decision not to sell it. It is, while it is an effective product, but I think, if they do want to bring it back, there needs to be some serious safeguard in place. It definitely will mean, the return of break-ins in pharmacy and possibly even ram rates at pharmacy next. This is the sort of thing we should be proactive about.
So, Lanny, what would you want then? Some businesses are being offered and have been offered, obviously, extra security measures and funding for that as a result of ram raids. Do you think pharmacies will be in the queue to get that kind of assistance from the government as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think if they want to bring pseudoephedrine back, that needs to be made available to pharmacy, because it's certainly I think it's hard to know, but I think we will see it come back. So it is still a precursor to make pea, and if it is available locally, then we will probably see the return of PLABs at home. And yeah, certainly, it needs to be made available. There needs to be a way to safeguard the situation, because we know what the harm is, and we've already seen it in the past. So if you're going to bring it back, then we need to have measure in place to prevent those harm. And the other thing that, that's important to think about now is that, we now have more pharmacies that, where their business model is to sell cheap product and to, help encourage people to buy more. So we need to think about what measures are in place to make sure, people can't just walk into a big department store and buy lots of pseudoephedrine product.
Okay, Lenny, that's an interesting point. Yep. That's an interesting point. So tell me a little bit more about that. Do you think that there should be limits on the amounts you can purchase? Should there be a register, for example, where people have to present an ID? What do you think would be appropriate safeguards?
Yeah, I think that was what pharmacy used to do, to make people present ID and keep a record of it. But it's sort of done quite haphazardly. There isn't a national database. Like, each pharmacy will have their own processes. So if we're going to bring it back and we already know what the harm was, then we can sort of, be proactive about it, maybe start a national register, have a way that we can record things, so there's a bit more information sharing between pharmacies, so we can safeguard our community.
And limits, do you think, on the product, Lenny, would be appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, perhaps, this is the thing. Medicine classification need to be left up to the experts. So in New Zealand, there's a pathway for that. It's called the Medicine Classification Committee. So that they are the right people to make that type of decision. So perhaps, they might want to consider bringing it back as a pharmacist-only medicine, where, you have to have a consultation with the pharmacist before you can purchase this product. So that's one of the measures they can put in place. However, I'm not an expert in that matter. And
understand.
I would encourage the politician to go through the correct pathway to get that sort of advice.
All right, Lenny, we're almost out of time. Very quickly, this is on the government's 100-day plan, so they're placing high priority on it. Is there another policy that you would rather see there in its place?
I think one of the big policy that National talked about is definitely wanting to bring back the $5 co-payment. I think one of the things that we've all noticed is that it's been really good for pharmacists not to have to collect that tax. So we've actually have more time to care for our patients. So if they want to bring it back, I would like to know, whether there's an easier way that's not going to take too much time away from pharmacists to actually action this red tape. There's many other things I like to talk about as well, like the minor ailment service. Like we've done this over winter. Certain regions have rolled it out, extended the service, but what is happening with that? Those are the sort of service that are going to help our community. And then I guess the other thing is that we want to hear more about what's going to happen with Maori and Pacific health professional, and pharmacist falls under that category as well. I think as a health professional, I really do see Maori and Pacific Islander being disproportionately affected.
Understand, Lenny. Yeah, understand. Yeah. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Mangawhai pharmacist Lenny Wong there. Interested in your thoughts, 2101 on text, or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, bringing back pseudoephedrine in cold meds over the counter. Agree or disagree, and why? It is 5:15. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Dozens of people, including young children, will have to spend the night at their church after flames ripped through their homes. Multiple buildings have been razed to the ground at the Ako Te o Whakakalisi Te Ano Ko Ngā Moa Church complex in Mangare Bridge in Auckland. Public health officials instructed some schools to close today while they assessed an asbestos risk, but none has been found. The fire service says it's very lucky everyone escaped with their lives. Emma Stanford has the story.
4 families have lost everything, making a hurried escape from their homes, still in their pyjamas. 14 fire and emergency crews rushed to Coronation Road just before 3 this morning to find flames burning through multiple buildings on land owned by the Ako Te o Whakakalisi Te Ane Ko Ngā Moa Church. Savai Naya's house was okay, but he was woken by neighbours knocking on his door telling him to get out.
Wake up, it's fire. I woke my daughter and she went outside and gave me, it's fire.
He said those fleeing took shoes from his doorstep when they realised they left without any.
They ran out from their houses, yeah, and no shoes. They just told me because I saw they told me when we were here. Those shoes were from your door.
Church trustee Frank Kaloi says about 40 people came to the church for refuge.
And there's been a steady flow of church members from all across Auckland coming with food and blankets as those people that were here at the time had just managed to leave the buildings with only the clothes that they had on. And we've all been here since in the church hall and prayers and sharing food.
The church is working on next steps.
We can meet the immediate needs, which is just a few nights accommodation here at the church complex, while we reach out to other agencies and other people to support in terms of accommodation. And but other than that, the church is just meeting now about what we can do right now to help these families.
Hulita heard of her friend's plight at 5 this morning and delivered supplies.
I'm really grateful that we all have God, so like these kind of circumstances, it doesn't really shake us. So her house completely burnt down. She got a little baby, 3-year-old, and she was just happy that she could get out in time, and just grateful everyone's safe.
Fire and Emergency Assistant Commander Chris Delphos says it appears to be an electrical fire and not suspicious.
We didn't see or hear any smoke alarms. There definitely wasn't any sprinklers in the building either. It was very lucky that all of these people got out of the fire in time.
Mr Delphos says Fens also has concerns about how many people were staying there. The age of the buildings prompted an asbestos risk assessment and closed 2 schools and 2 early childhood centres today. However, no signs of asbestos have been found.
International pressure is ramping up on Israel and Hamas to extend its truce, which is due to expire within the next hour. Another 16 hostages were released today, including 4 Thai nationals. 30 more Palestinians were released from jails in the 6th round of swaps. Israeli media is reporting the military will resume the attack on Gaza at 6 p.m. New Zealand time if the government doesn't receive a suitable list of hostages to be released. Hamas has told its fighters in the Gaza Strip to be ready to resume battles if the temporary truce is not extended before then. The ABC's Nicole Johnston reports.
In the Middle East, all eyes are on Qatar. That's where talks are happening to try and reach a deal to extend the temporary truce between Israel and Hamas. There's been a 6-day pause in the fighting. In that time, Hamas has released 93 hostages from Gaza in return for 210 Palestinians held in Israeli jails. Both sides released only women and children. Yahya al-Sarraj is the mayor of Gaza City. He's staying put there, along with around 800,000 Gazans still in the north. Al-Sarraj says in some neighbourhoods, 70% of buildings have been totally destroyed.
Many buildings, high-rise buildings, 7 stories, 3 stories, 2 stories, totally destructed. And if they take a building, they will not destroy the building. They will destroy all buildings around that. It's unbelievable what's happening.
What has it been like to spend more than 40 days inside Gaza City with the war all around you and on top of you?
Very terrifying, horrible. If you come alive in the morning, you just say, thanks God we are still alive. And you hear all the sounds around you. The sound of bombs is very terrifying. You hit a building maybe 10 kilometers away from you, but you feel like it's next door.
Meanwhile, Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades, says the youngest hostage, a 10-month-old baby, Kafir Babas, was killed by Israeli airstrikes, along with 2 other family members. This has not been confirmed. Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Patrick S. Ryder says the US wants civilians in Gaza to be protected, but Israel has a right to defend itself.
Don't forget, Hamas has publicly stated post-October 7th that they want to see a repeat of October 7th over and over and over again with the express purpose of eliminating Israel. So we understand that. But we also expect our Israeli partners to conduct their operations in accordance with the law of war.
In the other occupied Palestinian territory, the West Bank, tension is high. A funeral in the town of Jenin for 15-year-old Basul Abu al-Wafa, Palestinian officials say he was killed by the Israeli military, along with 8-year-old Adam Al-Ghul. Israel has not commented. 2 militants were also killed. Israel says it's targeting armed groups in Jenin. Mohammed Daragma is the bureau chief of the Arab newspaper Al-Sharq. He explains how the Israeli raid unfolded.
They attacked 2 gunmen inside a house and killed them and took their bodies. While they were leaving, some kids were throwing stones at them. Some of them would throw fireworks, and soldiers killed 2 of them. One is 8-year-old and one is 15. And if you look at the images, it's heartbreaking. They are kids.
While Palestinians and Israelis wait to find out whether the war is about to start again, Arab states are applying pressure to end it.
And in the last few minutes, CNN is reporting that Israel and Hamas are at an impasse. In a statement released from Hamas, it says Israel refused an offer to extend the truce in exchange for receiving 7 detained women and children and the bodies of 3 deceased women or children who Hamas claim were killed by Israeli bombardment. The truce will expire at 6 p.m. New Zealand time, 7 a.m. in Israel. It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Some of you getting in touch about the return of cold medications with pseudoephedrine and whether you think it's a good idea or not. Do keep it coming. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ane a ana mina pitipiti kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. A Northland pharmacist is criticising the coalition government's aim of bringing back over-the-counter cold medicines containing an ingredient that can be used in meth production. Pseudoephedrine has been prescription only for more than a decade, and Mangawhai's Lenny Wong told Checkpoint loosening availability would lead to chemist break-ins and home P labs. Lenny Wong says the government needs to weigh up the benefits against the potential harm. Fire and Emergency believes the 4 families who lost their homes in a blaze that ripped through Auckland's Akotiao Whakakalisi Te Aniko Namoa church complex this morning are lucky to be alive. The fire has displaced about 40 people, and while FENZ doesn't believe it was suspicious, Assistant Commander Chris Delfos says there were no sprinklers and no evidence of smoke alarms. Hamas has released 12 Israeli and 4 Thai hostages on the 6th day of the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Israel has freed 30 Palestinian prisoners in return. The truce is about to expire and both sides are under international pressure for an extension. Sentencing for Lauren Dickerson, who was convicted of murdering her 3 young daughters at Timaru in 2021, has been moved into next year. Mrs Dickerson had been due for sentence on December the 19th. And George W. Bush has paid tribute to former diplomat and presidential advisor Dr. Henry Kissinger, who has died at the age of 100. Mr Bush says America has lost one of the most dependable and distinctive voices on foreign affairs. And those are the headlines, Lisa.
Ngā mihi, Anna. Women's football is failing its players in key areas, including medical support and pay, according to a survey from this year's World Cup. The survey found 60% of respondents said they lacked mental health support, while 1 in 3 earned less than $48,000 a year from football. Joining us now is sports reporter Jonty Dine. Well, those results are pretty dire, aren't they, Jonty?
Yeah, I mean, they are a bit, especially after the excitement of the World Cup. It would seem that behind the scenes, a lot of the players were struggling financially, mentally and physically. So they surveyed 260 players from 26 teams, and as well as those figures you mentioned, it also found 10% of players didn't even get a medical exam before the tournament. It also found that 1 in 5 players at the World Cup actually needed a second job just to survive. So these issues were all underscored today with Wellington Phoenix star Chloe Knott announcing that she's actually terminated her contract with the club due to the financial pressures. She said the joy of playing while working working full-time no longer outweighed all the stress and the strain. Not played in all 38 of the Wellington Phoenix games, she captained them for a season, and she also scored the match winner against Perth just last weekend. So really gutting news that she has to cut her career short. One of her teammates, Mangare Elliott, she's over in Colombia at the moment after being called into the football Fern squad. She's only 18, but has been in the international system for a few years through age grades, and she says women's football simply needs to do more.
I think it's become so evident in recent years. I've seen it firsthand with teammates, how it affects the game, and at the end of the day, everyone is just there to turn up and play the game they love, and sometimes performances can be affected by it quite dramatically. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed. In terms of mental health support, I've felt support, but I think it could definitely improve. And in terms of pay equity, is not even near where it needs to be.
So on the subject of pay, the World Cup did have a record prize pool of 150 million, but that's still well below the 440 million that the winners of the Men's World Cup got. So clearly still some major gaps.
And let's go to cricket now. Captain Fantastic has scored another Test century.
He has, yeah. Now, another masterclass from Kane Williamson. So this was his 29th Test ton to equal the great Don Bradman for number of Test hundreds, and it was desperately needed. He got very little support, just 40s from Glenn Phillips and Daryl Mitchell, the other contributions of note. So once again, he dragged a side back into the contest. But speaking afterwards, it was a typically modest response from Williamson.
Humbling, but at the same time, the focus is always, it's about the team and trying to help get them in the best position possible and be a part of as many partnerships, and that's always the goal. And so that was the pleasing thing today, although it would have been nice to still be out there. A couple of wickets left, so it'd be nice to get a few more, and then we'll have our chance to bowl. So the surface is showing some signs of deteriorating quite a lot, so it looks like it'll be a bit of a scrap in the next few days.
So a short time ago, New Zealand were 307 for 8. Tailenders Cole Jamieson and Tim Southey were chipping away at that lead, and New Zealand trailed by just 3.
Thank you, John T. Sports reporter John T. Dine there. Allegations of blackmail have been levelled at the owners of a North Shore property, blocking access to walkers on a popular beach path. The owners want a heritage status removed so they can sell the property for what it's worth. While the dispute rolls on with the Auckland Council, they have erected a fence on the popular Milford to Takapuna walkway, which passes through their property. The path is also part of the 3,000-kilometre Te Araroa Trail, which runs the length of the country. Now, the owner's lawyer believes a common sense agreement can be reached and took the issue to a council committee meeting today, but he was met by Mayor Wayne Brown, who was not on the same page. Louise Tanuth reports.
The debate surrounds an old batch on Milford Beach, which was designated Heritage Category A in 2012. Without the heritage listing, it's a multi-million-dollar spot. With it, it's worth significantly less. The new owners have asked council to remove the listing, and in exchange they will give the land to the council for the public to freely walk through. At the moment, a fence blocks the popular walkway at the site of the dispute. The owner's lawyer, Alex Wittenhanna, told councillors a decision needs to be made urgently.
To divide the walkway in half, as council is suggesting, would be an act of vandalism. We ask for the voice of the people to be heard and for common sense to prevail at last. And respectfully, Mr Mayor, I can just hear you saying, just fix it.
Mr Wittenhanna says if the council agrees to a plan change to remove the heritage listing, the fence will come down.
If you agreed today to initiate the plan change, the fence would be down by the weekend.
It's blackmail, really, isn't it?
No, it's not blackmail at all.
Mayor Wayne Brown says the owners owe money in rates and they should raise the application themselves at their own cost.
They're sitting on several $1 million worth of land, which is clearly what they want to get their hands on. So raise it yourself. I mean, it's not the sort of behaviour that I approve of, really.
Mr Wittenhanna says the owners can't afford the rates and reminded the Mayor they had been letting the public access their property.
The Firth family have allowed the public to walk across the land, not just for a few years, but for decades and decades and decades, since the end of the Second World War.
Well, good on them for that.
Good on them, indeed.
A sign on the walkway says walkers need to take a detour up about 60 stairs and onto the road before linking back onto the walkway, down another flight of stairs about a block away. The detour isn't going down well with everyone. Many people have been clambering over the rocks that surround the property to reach the other side instead. Not doable for everyone.
Not at my age and stage, no. I just come to here and I say, oh well, I'm not going any further, and back I go.
One time we did it when the tide had just gone out, so some of the rocks were quite slippery actually, so much better to have the conventional path.
Well, I imagine there's been quite a few people hurt, do need a bit of agility and strength to get over it, so it's quite dangerous.
Probably just go back the other way.
The Takapuna Residents Association launched a petition for the walkway to reopen, gathering more than 7,000 signatures last month. Chairperson Stephen Salt says they need a decision because clambering over the rocks isn't a solution.
The current situation is actually likely to lead to more serious injury, if not a fatality.
Mayor Wayne Brown doesn't see any problem with the detour.
In terms of the alternatives, you can walk up some steps. By the looks of some of the people, it wouldn't do them any harm.
Hey,
or you can walk around the waterfront.
Yeah, just if we could keep the...
No, I'm keeping to the thing here. There is no risk-free thing. If we follow this, we'll be handrails up the 90-mile beach.
Council advisors warned changing the agreement to the landowner's request and removing the heritage status could set a precedent for others wanting to increase the value of their property. Independent Māori Statutory Board member Tau Henare says mana whenua haven't been consulted during the process, and he wondered why Council was dedicating so much effort to the issue in the first place.
This is not Council's property. It's their property. You look after it. And we've spent 4.5 hours on this issue. God forbid we spend 4.5 hours on rates relief for poor people out in South Auckland, out in West Auckland.
The walk from Takapuna to Milford is well loved by walkers. Now frustrated, it's off bounds.
I'm very sad. Yeah, I didn't know it was closed off. It's kind of a shame because, it's a really nice one.
I think it's really sad that we've come to a point of conflict. I just hope it's resolved quickly.
Unfortunately, a quick fix isn't on the horizon. The issue has been bunted to the Devonport Takapuna Local Board. It will meet with the owners to discuss options to allow permanent public access across the site and will report back by June next year. In the meantime, the board will request the owners remove the fence while discussions are ongoing. Once the Takapuna Devonport Local Board has talked to the owners of the Kitchener property, any permanent decision will have to go back to the council.
27 minutes away from 6. Let us know your thoughts on that one. Should the council loosen the regulations there to allow these people to sell the property or just walk around the block? Let us know. 2101 on text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. 27 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa NINA, ko Nona Peltier. Nona's in the studio. Business confidence, Nona. It's risen to its highest level in nearly 9 years. What is the reason?
Well, apparently it has something to do with the outcome of the election, I would say, because it does seem to be tied to that. In fact, ANZ, who comes out with the business outlook, tended to link the two together, saying another month of honeymoon. So there you go. So it rose, I guess the survey found business confidence rose to a net 31%. That's the highest since March 2015.
This is just their feels, though, isn't it?
How they feel. It's always about how they feel. That's what confidence is, right? So, confidence, though, does tend to drive economic activity. And certainly it does drive investment. But anyways, a net 26% are feeling a lot more positive about their own outlook, which is quite an important number. And that was a 2-year high. What else did the ANZ say? Well, the economy is slowing down. It's interesting. That's one of the things that the Reserve Bank wanted to see regarding inflation expectations. The business community isn't as certain about that, but certain about a lot of other things. So definitely they're expecting exports to improve. They're expecting to see more investment. So overall, quite positive. There you go.
Okay, Genesis Energy, Huntly Power Station, is at the centre of the company's $1.1 billion investment in renewable energy. So what is the plan for that?
Well, this is really an interesting one. It's something that the market has been wondering about for a while. So there was a lot of question marks over this Lake Onslow, which was designed to be a battery storage. It was going to cost like $15 billion. That amount of investment in a battery storage, that's so in a dry year, you would have backup storage. But it was in the South Island. Huntly can produce enough energy to support, say, 95% renewable energy, fill in the other bits if there's, say, the wind stops blowing, the sun stops shining, or we don't get enough rain and we have a drought. So, and it's Huntly, it's based in the North Island. But it was one of those things that because it uses carbon, firing up the coal burner. Coal, but also gas, etc. This was seen as a negative. Genesis has said, well, it isn't. We are going to be able to invest in biomass and others and are going to keep Huntly going. They're saying it's central to their $1.1 billion development plan. They're planning to get to 95% renewable energy, providing Huntly is going to, they're going to move towards turning on one of their turbines to be more instant on and off. They're going to try and develop a biomass. They're looking at the change in the government's policy regarding offshore oil and gas exploration is not going to affect them directly because they have the Kupe field. They're expecting that to generate the money they need to develop their plants. But I spoke with the chief executive just about an hour ago, and he said that he thought that that we should go much further than zero net carbon by 2050. We have a huge opportunity to power much bigger businesses here in New Zealand. We're well placed to provide the renewable energy that the world is hungry for, and that we should be far more ambitious. And he told a bunch of investment people today that story, and he said he got an 8 out of 10. So there you go. What about the market? What numbers do we give that? Well, look, the market did really well today. It ended up 0.8%, a 94-point gain to 11,330. Genesis was negative, like not negative, but neutral rather. Yep. It was like unchanged in the end. The New Zealand dollar is hanging on, 61.8 US cents, 93.1 Australian, and 48.7 British pence. Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with Business News. Now, a tallish story. Wellington Zoo's welcomed a baby giraffe, the first to be born there in almost 2 decades. And it's a girl, born to mum Zuri and dad Sunny in the early hours of yesterday morning. Wellington Zoo Animal Care Manager Nick Dunn confirms she is just delicious.
It's very, very cute. She's gorgeous. She, like mum, but someone's put her in the tumble dryer. It's a smaller version of. A little bit wrinkly still, and very, very cute.
And size, can you give us a bit of scale? I mean, is she taller than you? Do you know? What size is she?
She's actually about the same height as me. So we went in this morning to give her vet checks and everything, and as we're working next to her, I looked her straight in the eye, and I thought, you're the same height as me, madam.
And how tall are you, Nick?
I'm 5'11".
Okay, so pretty...
178 centimetres, sorry, in metric.
Yeah, and do you know how much she weighs? Is that a thing for giraffe babies?
We haven't weighed her yet, no. The birthing stool, the scales are actually in a room just next door to the birthing stool, but we're just taking things nice and slow and letting her get settled in. So we haven't wanted to sort of get her through to those scales yet. It's not so important for us right at the moment. It will be soon, and we'll start moving her through this so that we can get regular weights and make sure she's growing and healthy. But right now, in the first few days, it's not something we're too concerned about.
You guys have been waiting for a while, haven't you? Because giraffe pregnancies are long.
Really long, yeah, sort of nearly 15 months. And the good thing with a long pregnancy means it gives us a long time to plan for every eventuality. It's not always something that goes according to plan. Sometimes you need to have veterinary intervention and other things in place. And so it's given us a really good long time to make sure that we've got everything set up for every eventuality.
Things went smoothly though, did it?
Thankfully they did, yeah. We were so pleased. There's so many possibilities that, we could have ended up, assisted births or general anaesthetic for the mum to have caesarean sections, all those things. So much specialist equipment needed to be on hand and, teams of people, including anaesthetists, large animal vets, specialist vets, all of those sorts of things that were on call, on standby, but thankfully not needed.
It is a bit of an abrupt start to life, isn't it, for a baby giraffe? Because the mums don't lie down during birth, do they?
No, they don't. They certainly don't. So it's a 6-foot drop, smack on the floor, and that's what gets the breathing going. Yeah, so
You're
it's a
kidding,
rude awakening.
Nick. That's sort of what jolts the little one awake.
Yeah. So if you land 6 foot drop, you're going to take a big old deep breath. Gets the blood flowing.
How soon did she get up?
Oh, she took a little while, but they're up and mobile really quick. Unlike a lot of animals, if you're born out on the savannah, there's a lot of things out there that's looking to eat you, and you're very vulnerable when you're young and wobbly. So it's really important that you get up and you can follow mum and stick with the safety of the herd. So she was up in within the hour, she was finding her feet.
Couple of quick things. What happens with her name?
With her name, we are going to come up with a few different names on a short list. So, we often work with our conservation partners to help us choose names. And so it will be a name that is suitable, and it will be a name certainly from one of the countries that giraffe come from. And then we're going to get a short list together, and we'll probably go out to some kind of a vote, I imagine.
And how long before people can see her?
Well, that's a bit of a how long's a piece of string at the moment, because what we want to do is make sure that her and mum are really well bonded and that she's fit and healthy and everything's as we expect it to be over the next few days. We're also then going to start introducing the rest of the tower. So that's Auntie Zahara and Dad Sonny. And then we're going to look to hopefully making sure that everyone's calm, everyone's happy and everyone's healthy. We'll be looking at maybe towards the end of next week, hopefully out in the habitat so people can see her.
And that's Nick Dunn, Wellington Zoo Animal Care Manager. You might have picked up on the fact that he said the tower. That's the collective noun for a herd of giraffe. Tower, love it. Totter is the other one. It is 17 minutes away from 6 and you were Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. 2101 on text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ko Anna Ano tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. But getting back to that giraffe story,
yes.
Why does it not surprise me that a giraffe is your spirit animal?
I love giraffes.
That's great.
They're amazing. That or a meerkat or a combination. I don't know what that creature would look like, but I'm right there with them.
And that birthing video, gosh, you need to check it.
Check it out online. It is amazing.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing.
Drop of 6 foot, who knew? Gosh. Right, don't know what that is in metres, actually.
No.
God. Anyway, on to the headlines. Wellington's mayor says she has been receiving hundreds of messages of support after admitting to a drink problem. Yesterday, Tori Whānau announced she was getting professional help after being drunk at a Wellington bar recently, the second such incident this year. Ms Whānau says she's deeply thankful for the support she's received. US-based tech firm Unity Software has announced it will be severing its agreement with Weta Digital as it looks to reduce its workforce, resulting in 265 redundancies. The Wellington Chamber of Commerce says that will be a loss for the city. An international counter-terrorism expert believes police had no choice but to take the Christchurch terror attack gunman's claims of multiple shooters seriously. Scott Wilson provided evidence via audio-visual link during today's inquest proceedings into the 51 deaths from the 2019 mosque attacks. He said police needed to take the reports at face value. Business confidence has risen to its highest level in nearly 9 years as the economy heads for a soft landing and firms look towards possible policy changes from the new government. ANZ's October monthly survey shows a net 31% of respondents expect the overall economy to improve over the next 12 months, the highest since March 2015. And the 6-day truce between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip is due to expire at 6 o'clock tonight. Both sides are facing international pressure for it to continue. And those are the headlines, Lisa.
Ngā mihi, Anna. And as you heard there, Tori Whānau says she's received hundreds of messages of support after admitting to having a drinking problem. But some councillors are questioning whether she's up to the job. The Wellington Mayor revealed to RNZ yesterday she's getting professional help after another drunken episode in public earlier this month. Nick James reports.
A day after revealing she's got a drinking problem, the Wellington Mayor was dialing into a council committee meeting from home, struck down with COVID. Committee Chair Tim Brown acknowledged the Mayor as the meeting got underway.
I'd just like to wish Tori kia kaha and
you've got my personal support. I think, we're looking forward to you being fully back on board, Tori, and we hope that you go through these challenges and come out stronger, which I'm sure you will.
Deputy Mayor Laurie Foon shared her support for Tori Whanau and her desire for her to continue in the job.
We've seen no signs in our council space of any impacts of what's going on for Tori in her personal life, and I absolutely know that she can carry on and is a great choice for the role.
Councillor Nico Winera shared a similar sentiment.
The only point at which anything regarding someone else's private struggles, whatever they may be, would be relevant to my job is if it was impacting their ability to do work at this organisation, and to date I haven't seen any evidence that that's the case.
However, Councillor Nicola Young believes Miss Whanau needs to go.
She needs to focus on her health problems 100%, and we need a mayor who's focusing on the city 100%. So I think it's time for her to step aside, stand down, so that we can have strong leadership, because people are really concerned about the future of Wellington, and Wellington is more important than one individual.
Councillor Ray Chung thinks it will be hard for her to stay on.
It's going to be very difficult for her. I think that she actually needs professional help, so she needs to take time off, and she won't be able to do that with the pressure that we're under here. We're pushing 60, 70 hours a week here, so she won't be able to keep that up if she gets treatment.
Councillor Diane Calvert was reserving judgment.
We do need to meet and talk with Tori and find out where she's at and what support she needs around her. But the mayor is a crucial role for the city.
Wellington City Council Chief Executive Barbara Makero says she'll support the mayor in her capacity as Chief Executive. The mayor herself says she's deeply thankful for the support she's received and is looking forward to getting stuck back into the mahi.
More than 250 jobs are going from Weta Digital after an American tech company ended its agreement with the Wellington-based company. The company acquired Weta Digital from New Zealand-owned Weta FX in 2021. Weta FX says it will now try to rehire back as many staff as possible. Our reporter Crystal Gibbons joins us now with more details. Crystal, what has Weta FX been saying about this?
So Weta FX said it and Unity mutually agreed to terminate that service agreement on November the 25th. Weta FX said it made more sense for them to own the production activities directly. As they said, they are aiming to hire back as many staff affected as possible, and they have already cautioned that some roles they won't be able to accommodate. Those job cuts do come into effect on December the 10th, which is of course just 15 days before Christmas. Both Unity Software and Weta FX have, however, said they will support jobs that have been cut, or those people.
And how are the employees feeling about this?
Yes, so Weta FX employees were notified about the redundancies by email yesterday. One told us this afternoon that she's now feeling quite uncertain about her job future, as it's already been quite a difficult year due to the industry strikes. She told us that people were really shocked by the announcement, but were rallying together. The employee did, however, tell us that the split between Weta FX and Weta Digital had overcomplicated things, so she was quite pleased to see that they might now come back together. Several other employees we approached today, however, told us they had signed a confidentiality agreement.
So that is the workers, and I'm just now wondering about the community, because this is potentially a lot of people who are not going to be collecting a paycheck.
Yeah, and there is definitely some concern in the community. When we reached out to those in Miramar today, they were pretty close-lipped. The Wellington Chamber of Commerce, however, is quite concerned, and they've told us that they're concerned particularly about those higher-paying specialist roles, which they say could be mostly six figures, and they're concerned that they might go offshore now with those redundancies. Their chief executive, Simon Askey, told us that Wellington's been doing really well in the tech field, and they really want to see that continue.
Thank you for that, Crystal. That is Crystal Gibbons, our reporter, joining us live from Wellington on the more than 250 jobs that are going from Weta Digital. It is 10 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A sharp jump in respiratory infections in China has many on edge with flashbacks to the height of the COVID pandemic and long lockdowns. Beijing has told the World Health Organization the surge is being caused by a number of known illnesses. Here's the ABC's Kathleen Calderwood.
A hospital waiting room overflowing with parents and children. IV drips hanging from the ceiling. Mums and dads rubbing the backs of their little ones or giving them a comfortable place to lay their heads while they wait to be seen. Images like this have flooded Chinese social media and appeared on state-run news bulletins as the country navigates a surge of respiratory illnesses during its first full winter after harsh COVID restrictions were lifted.
I can absolutely understand people's concerns, particularly given it was in late 2019 that we were hearing about a undiagnosed pneumonia in China.
That's Professor Philip Britton, a paediatric infectious diseases doctor from the University of Sydney Medical School.
We are watching this closely. We know the WHO is watching it closely. As more information comes in, we'll be able to perform risk assessments for Australia, but at the moment our sense is that the risk is not high.
Last week, the World Health Organization asked China for lab results and more epidemiology information, citing reports in the media and on monitoring service ProMed of clusters of undiagnosed pneumonia in children in the country's north. The next day, Chinese health authorities held a teleconference with the WHO and provided the information, showing increased hospital presentations and admissions due to RSV, adenovirus and influenza, as well as a common pneumonia bacteria. Professor Britton says this presents a unique problem for China because of resistance to antibiotics.
Look, all antimicrobial resistance is a concern. The truth is with this pathogen, however, that most of the treatment is not dependent on antibiotics. It's really about supportive care.
For now, the world is watching as China's health system tries to stay on top of this outbreak. Professor of International Health Jaya Dantas from Curtin University says one benefit of the pandemic is systems are now better equipped to monitor future outbreaks.
They have measures put in place for contact tracing, for monitoring, gathering of epidemiological data, and China is quite good in actually collecting that data, and they have been doing so since the presentations in the last month or so.
And according to Dr. Carl Mingus from the University of New Haven, there's no reason at this stage to doubt the data coming out of China.
I think China's aware that the world's watching. So there's no reason to think that anything's being hidden. And most diseases that we're seeing are things that are pretty common after a period of extreme isolation.
It's expected this wave could continue for some time yet.
A security review is underway after a series of brazen breakouts from a Waikato wildlife sanctuary. In the past 2 months, 3 kakapo have gone over the wire at Sanctuary Mountain, Mongatotari, near Pukeatua. The famously curious parrots apparently making short work of the 47-kilometre pest-proof fence. Repeat offender Motupohui and 2 other kakapo have been transferred to another protected area for their own safety. Deirdre Verco, Dock Operations Manager Kakapo, explains how they think the flightless birds are busting out.
They can't fly, but they are exceptional climbers. We're really not entirely sure how they're getting out because unless we put a GoPro on them or something, it's really hard to catch them in the act. But what we think is happening is we think that they're using some of the vegetation that is near to the fence line to get themselves up and above the barrier, the kakapo-proof barrier that has been installed on the fence, and somehow they're using that vegetation where they can to pop themselves outside.
So they're sort of like, I don't know, paragliding in some sense off the vegetation.
Yeah, we're really not sure. It's hard to tell. That forest inside the fence is a living, breathing organism. It's changing all the time. And we have got a strip of vegetation clearance next to the fence. But in high winds or bad weather, you can have tree fall and all sorts of things happening. So it may be that on the odd occasion, one of the birds has stumbled across a part of the tree that's come down a little bit, and they've been able to use that to get above the barrier and get out. So yeah.
How high is the fence?
I think it's actually, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's about 1.5 meters high, maybe 2 meters high. And it's the predator-proof fence are designed to keep predators out. They're not designed to keep kakapo in. So we've adapted the fence, or the team at Mangatotari Sanctuary have adapted the fence with a strip of tin basically on the inside of the fence that kakapo can't climb past, because they're actually quite good climbers. They can use their claws and their beak to climb up posts and up wire netting and all sorts of things. So we've designed this barrier. We've tested that in captivity and we're pretty confident they can't climb past the barrier. which is why we suspect that they're using some other means.
So why would they do this? Just because they can and they like a challenge, or what?
Well, again, that's one, it's quite difficult to understand that. It might just be an accident. They've suddenly found them outside of the sanctuary, and the first bird that got out definitely seemed to be trying to get back in. It was coming back to the location where it escaped. So, but yeah, we don't know. It might be that they're really keen to explore and that they've got this challenge in front of them. The birds that have escaped are juveniles. They're about 4 years old, but that's a juvenile for a kakapo. So it might be that they're just, they've got that dispersal thing going on. They're really trying to explore the area.
So you've got trackers on them, right? So what kind of workload does it put on the rangers to keep, tabs on where these guys are?
Yeah, and this is why we've reduced the population up there from 10 down to 7, just to reduce that monitoring workload, because we were hoping that by now the birds would have settled into home ranges and our monitoring would be reducing, but we're finding that that's not the case. So yeah, they do have transmitters, and we can track the birds, and we're doing that several times a week to make sure we know where they are. And we also have a remote monitoring system set up on the mountain, so if they come within a range of a data log, basically, then we can get their information. But when they're living right next to the fence, it's quite hard to tell if they're inside or outside because it's such a fine line.
So you have to physically go out and check on them, do you, Deirdre?
Yeah, that's right. So when the birds have got themselves nicely settled in the interior of the mountain, then we can drop back our monitoring. But those birds that are living or exploring the fence extensively, they're the ones that are giving us a bit more of a run for our money. So we're actually physically going and tracking in on them, seeing if they're inside or out.
So the 3 that you removed, one of whom is a repeat offender, I understand. Tell us about them and where you've taken them.
Motupohui, along with Manawanui and Kanawera, have been transferred back down south to an island in Fiordland where they were from originally. So they've been transferred. They're safe down there now, and that just leaves us with a 7 at Mangare, and that's still a really good number for us to learn a lot about the site and its feasibility for Kakapo in the future.
Yeah, so how do you future-proof the sanctuary then?
Good question, and that's exactly what we're trying to learn now, and it's really important for us to learn as much as we can about the sanctuary because it's more than 3,000 hectares. It's a huge piece of potential real estate for Kakapo, and we've essentially run out of room for them on the predator-free islands down south. So how do we future-proof? Well, there's a couple of things we're looking at. One is looking at that vegetation clearance. How can we step that up? How can we make sure that we're reducing that chance of them escaping? And the other thread that we're looking at is how can we more quickly detect when they do escape? So we're looking into things like live GPS tracking, for example.
I know this is not ideal. You don't like jailbreakers, but man, you have to admire their tenacity, don't you, Deirdre? That's part of their charm.
Yeah, it's definitely captured people's imaginations. And, it's Kakapo are critically endangered. There are less than 250. So when you get a bird escaping a sanctuary and they're out there and where there are dangers, it just highlights the importance of that predator-free movement for New Zealand. A lot of our other species are facing the risks out there and the dangers out there every day, but when you've only got 250 of a species, it really highlights that risk.
And that's Deirdre Vercoe from DOC on the Kakapo Houdinis that keep breaking out. Some feedback on pseudoephedrine. Brian says the return of pseudoephedrine is idiocy. This is the policy to make it available over the counter without a prescription. It's an ACT policy. Look at the most recent Cochrane report on pseudoephedrine. This person says it finds minimal benefits for colds. Colleen, though, says pseudoephedrine is brilliant. Yes, bring it back. Another says, hell yes, that cold medication actually works. Now we just pay extra for Panadol, claiming to be a cold medication that doesn't really work.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. A pharmacist warns bringing back over-the-counter cold medicines containing pseudoephedrine could make chemist shops a target for robberies and ram raids. Pseudoephedrine has been prescription only since 2011 because it can be used to make illegal drug methamphetamine. But the new government plans to loosen the rules. Mangare pharmacist Lanny Wong has told Checkpoint she's worried the change will result in more crime.
I look at the need of my community. So if my community wants want it, I will stock it. But if it becomes, a danger and there are PLABs starting in my community, or there's risk of break-in or putting my staff at risk of hold-ups and things like that, then I have to make that tough decision not to sell it.
Lanny Wong says there will have to be rules controlling the purchase of pseudoephedrine. Samples from a large fire at Mangare Bridge in Auckland have shown no sign of asbestos. The 3 a.m. fire destroyed church buildings housing families in need and raised concerns about asbestos being released into the air. Te Whatu Ora Medical Officer of Health Denise Barnfather says the samples taken from around the fire did not contain asbestos. 4 families lost their homes and 40 people will sleep at the church tonight. Fire and Emergency says the buildings did not have smoke alarms or sprinklers. The fire is believed to have been sparked by an electrical fault. Tori Whānau says she's received hundreds of messages of support after admitting to having a drinking problem. The Wellington mayor revealed to Radio New Zealand yesterday she's getting professional help after getting drunk in public earlier this month. Nick James reports.
Ms Whānau says she's deeply thankful for the support she's received and looking forward to getting stuck back into the mahi. Wellington City Council Chief Executive Barbara Mangare says she'll support the Mayor in her capacity as Chief Executive. She says she cares for her well-being and will be working with her office to ensure she gets the care that she needs. Some councillors are backing Ms Whānau, saying that she should carry on in the role. Meanwhile, others believe it will be difficult for her to continue as Mayor.
Business confidence has risen to its highest level in nearly 9 years as the economy heads for a soft landing and firms look towards possible policy changes from the new government. ANZ's monthly survey shows a net 31% of respondents expect the overall economy to improve over the next 12 months, the highest since March 2015. A net 26% said their own business outlook was positive, a 2-year high. Senior economist Miles Workman says the economy is slowing under high interest rates, but a severe downturn has been avoided. He says there are still doubts whether the slowdown is enough to bring inflation down. International pressure is growing for Israel and Hamas to extend the 6-day ceasefire after another exchange of hostages in the besieged Gaza Strip. As the US Secretary of State visits Israel, China is urging the UN Security Council to intensify its diplomatic mediation. The ABC's Jono Wakely reports.
Outside Air Force One, US President Joe Biden has announced another American hostage held by Hamas is on their way back home.
Leah Benin is safe in Egypt. She'll soon be home with her 3 children.
The US citizen was taken hostage by Hamas on the 7th of October, along with roughly 240 others. This comes after the release of 10 Israeli women and children and 4 Thai nationals in exchange for 30 Palestinian prisoners, most of which are minors.
And news just to hand, the truce has been extended and we'll bring you more details as they come to hand. An Auckland councillor fears that some of the city's rubbish collections could be reduced from a weekly to a fortnightly service. Daniel Newman says the council's draft waste management plan for 2024 suggests collecting red refuse bins every 2 weeks instead of weekly. The plan would come into effect once the new food scrap bins, which will continue to be collected weekly, are well established. He says the food scrap bins should be an addition to the usual rubbish collection, not a replacement. Mr Newman is urging Aucklanders to oppose the council's plan. An international counter-terrorism expert believes police had no choice but to take seriously the Christchurch terror attack gunman's claims of multiple shooters. 2 experts provided evidence during today's proceedings into the inquest into the 51 deaths of the 2019 mosque attacks via audio-visual link. They were asked about false information the gunman gave police upon arrest. Counter-terrorism expert Scott Wilson said police needed to follow every lead.
If they didn't and they got that wrong, they would be severely criticised. If another 4 or 5 gunmen had popped up in Christchurch or other cities and the police hadn't taken that seriously, we'd be having another inquest to say why had the police not done that properly. So they have to take everything at face value.
And fellow expert Dr Frank Straub said it is reasonable for an offender to deliberately waste police resource. Controversial American diplomat and presidential advisor Henry Kissinger has died at the age of 100. Dr. Kissinger is the only person ever to be White House National Security Advisor and Secretary of State at the same time, and he exercised a control over US foreign policy that has rarely been equalled by anyone who was not president. He had a hand in many global events in the 1970s, including ending US participation in the Vietnam War, and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Police say emergency services are responding to a serious crash at Hukiranui in Northland. They say initial indications suggest 2 people have received critical injuries. The crash involved one vehicle on State Highway 1. Police say the road is partially blocked and motorists can expect some delays. And in sport, a 52-run 9th wicket stand between skipper Tim Southee and Kyle Jamieson has given New Zealand a narrow first innings lead in the first cricket test against Bangladesh in Sylhet. Resuming on day 3 at 266 for 8 and needing a further 45 runs to overtake the hosts' first innings of 310, Southee and Jamieson got the Black Caps through to 316 before Jamieson was dismissed for 23. Southee was the last to go out for 35, with the Black Caps all out for 317. And that's the news.
This Saturday morning, neuropsychologist Andy Mitchell tells us about his 10 trips. Psychedelic ones, that is. Professor Richard Jackson on why the military should be abolished. Greg Sestero of cult movie The Room and immortalised in The Disaster Artist talks about the film and friendship that changed his life and career. And Funky and Sexy, the Stud siblings, say the best things in life are cheese. I'm Susie Ferguson. Join me this Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And now it is time for the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. For Northland to Taumaranui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Partly cloudy, possible showers in the Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui tomorrow afternoon or evening. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, cloudy periods with isolated showers. Taranaki to Kapiti Coast, partly cloudy with isolated showers inland, but it will become fine tomorrow afternoon. For Wellington and Wairarapa, mainly fine, but cloud increasing tomorrow with a few morning showers. Nelson, Bulla and Westland, mainly fine, apart from some cloudy periods about Westland. Canterbury and Marlborough, cloudy at times. There will be some isolated showers which could turn to rain for a time this evening. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods with a few showers today. And for the Chatham Islands, often cloudy with a few showers, but they should clear tomorrow morning. RNZ National. It is 6:08 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Kia ora rā e ho. Nau mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. As you heard, the Israel-Hamas ceasefire has been extended just minutes before it was due to expire. We will bring you more detail as it comes to hand. Former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died at the age of 100. He passed away at his home in Connecticut. Dr. Kissinger was Secretary of State under Presidents Nixon and Ford. The German-born Jewish refugees' efforts led to the diplomatic opening of China, landmark US-Soviet arms control talks, expanded ties between Israel and its Arab neighbours, and the Paris Peace Accords with North Vietnam. More now on his legacy from CNN.
I know all of you will want to hear from the new Secretary of State.
Henry Kissinger never really needed an introduction on the world stage again. Kissinger, the most famous statesman of the last half of the 20th century. Celebrated and controversial.
I'm not going to make any.
As Richard Nixon's national security advisor and Secretary of State, the diplomat wielded enormous power and influence. So trusted that it was Kissinger who went to China on a secret mission to explore a historic opening of U.S. relations with communist China.
Whoever went would be alone in Beijing with no communication. And therefore, if he didn't know Nixon's mind, he might do foolish things.
Initially, there were fears a U.S.-China ping-pong exchange match would affect the high-stakes political gambit.
Every once in a while, something happens in diplomacy which transcends the drafting of cables.
Vietnam. Casualties mounted as the Vietnamese gained territory. Nixon and an undiplomatic Kissinger thought more bombing of the North would help.
I would then recommend that you start bombing the retreaters out of them within 48 hours.
Kissinger approved secret bombings of North Vietnamese units in Cambodia without congressional approval. He would say sometimes statesmen have to choose among evils, moral compromises in messy conflicts. Kissinger and his Vietnamese counterpart, Le Duc Tho, were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their role in negotiating a ceasefire.
I have to say, I have never dealt with a group of people as treacherous as the North Vietnamese leadership.
Kissinger insisted trouble on the home front hurt chances to succeed in Vietnam.
We lost the war because we were divided, and also because we were too uncertain about what we wanted.
Kissinger's support for a coup in Chile and pro-U.S. military strongmen in other parts of the world drew criticism.
Arrest Henry Kissinger for war crimes!
Kissinger's legacy would be contested decades later when he testified in Congress at the age of 91. Kissinger grew up in Germany with war clouds swirling. His family fled when he was 15.
About half of the people I went to school with and about 13 members of my own family died in concentration camps.
A Jewish Secretary of State who would later listen to his president criticize American Jewish leaders.
It's about goddamn time that the Jew in America realized he's an American first and a Jew second. Well, I couldn't agree more.
I only heard anti-Semitic comments when some Jewish group would attack him for something he had done.
In the Middle East, Kissinger performed what came to be known as shuttle diplomacy to separate Israeli and Arab forces, setting the stage for future peace accords. When Nixon resigned as president, Kissinger stayed on as Gerald Ford's Secretary of State. His opinion still widely sought after by governments and businesses after leaving public office.
You want to leave your country better off than you found it. And there's nothing in private life you can do that's as interesting and as fulfilling.
There was one job Kissinger said he never got to do in his life, a sports announcer. However, the globe-trotting diplomat did star in some of history's biggest games.
One of the most visible impacts of climate change is more frequent and severe natural disasters. One of the worst ones to hit Australia happened 4 years ago in what was called the Black Summer bushfires. In one fire-hit region, the community is recovering from the blazes of 2019 to 2020, but is also preparing for dangerous conditions in the years to come. Here's the BBC's Phil Mercer.
The Black Summer fires destroyed an area of land the size of the United Kingdom. In Bilpin, northwest of Sydney, much of Simon Tadross's orchard was ruined.
They were horrific, never seen nothing like it, very scary.
He's rebuilt and replanted, but believes the fires will return.
We've been here for 40 years and we've had 4 or 5 different major fire events. And it will happen again, regardless of what people say or what happens. We will get major fires again.
An inquiry found that climate change had made the blazes of 2019-20 more extreme. Modern Australia had never seen such ferocity.
This scared me. This really scared me. I think it's given Australia a huge wake-up call on just how susceptible we are and how dangerous things can be.
The memories of the fires are still fresh in this part of the Blue Mountains. People remember the fear and the panic they felt during that terrible time. But here in Bilpin, there is an unmistakable sense of renewal and a determination to rebuild.
The flames that tore through Bilpin came from a strategic backburn that went badly wrong. It was lit deliberately by emergency crews to try to stop the advance of another major outbreak.
This is the Enchanted Cove.
Lionel Bucket's holiday cabins and his fireproof home were engulfed but survived.
We've put in new water systems too now, so we've got a massive water storage with big, heavy mains, lines that can turn sprinklers on everything. And sprinklers work. If you've got the water, you can save yourself from a fire. Climate change means it happens more often. So it used to happen every 10 to 20 years. Now maybe it's more likely to be every 6 or 7 years.
For years, conservationists have said that warming temperatures were making Australia more vulnerable to natural disasters.
Black Summer was a landmark in Australians' understanding that climate change is not just a future problem, it's here and now and it's harming our communities.
Australia plans to reach net zero emissions by 2050. In fire-prone communities, there's a determination to be better prepared for the next onslaught, whenever it might come.
The Israel Hamas ceasefire has been extended just minutes before it was due to expire. Israel's military says a truce with Hamas will continue in light of the mediators' efforts to continue the process of releasing hostages. It comes just an hour after Hamas released a statement saying discussions were at an impasse because Israel had declined to receive 7 women, child hostages, and the bodies of 3 others the group says were killed during Israel's bombardment. It is understood there was debate between Israel and Hamas over the names of the hostages due to be released. On each day of the ceasefire, Israeli hostages taken by Hamas during the October 7 attacks were traded for Palestinian prisoners. Up to 200 aid trucks a day have also been crossing into Gaza, but that's still woefully short of what is needed, according to aid groups. Doctors treating the wounded in Gaza are appealing for some of the most basic supplies like gauze, burn cream, pins and fixtures for broken limbs. Dozens of aid workers have also been killed in the war on Gaza. 2 Médecins Sans Frontières doctors and a colleague were killed in a missile strike on a hospital in northern Gaza earlier this month. And joining us now from Jerusalem is Dr. Natalie Thurtle, MSF Deputy Medical Coordinator for the Emergency Response in Gaza. Hello, Doctor.
Hi.
First off, our condolences on the sad loss of your colleagues. This must be an incredibly difficult thing for everybody to deal with.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been extremely challenging for the team because we lost those 2 colleagues. They were killed, but we also had our convoy come under attack, and we, during that attack, 2 additional relatives of our staff were killed. So it's been a really challenging week for our staff, and it's obviously had a knock-on impact on our ability to treat patients and provide the services that we normally provide in Gaza.
I wonder, what is your response to the news that there is an extension to the ceasefire? It is only another day, it seems, at this point.
So we welcome any extension to the current pause in hostilities, but it's not enough. We need a permanent ceasefire to really start to address any of the need in a meaningful way in Gaza. Our team are working in southern Gaza in Nasser Hospital. They're providing burn surgery and outpatient burn care, but the need is absolutely overwhelming, and it's impossible to meet that need because the healthcare infrastructure in Gaza has been systematically destroyed. So there's less than half the number of inpatient beds that there were prior to the war starting. There's, as you mentioned, a loss of a large number of healthcare professionals related to the conflict. And the hospitals that are there are really limping along with minimal supplies because the border is very narrow and it's very difficult for, very tight for trucks to get in. There's hundreds of trucks even now with the ceasefire still clogged up at the border. And so it's an extremely challenging landscape for the people of Gaza to try and access meaningful healthcare in a context where they've had a huge increase in demand for emergency healthcare because you've got hundreds and thousands of injured people and almost half of whom are children.
It sounds utterly overwhelming and difficult for people who are not there to comprehend.
Yeah, I think it's hard to visualise somehow the level of destruction But the very basic things are missing. I had a call yesterday morning from our the staff member in the north who was leading our staff when they were trapped and led them finally mostly to safety. He reported that where he's sheltering, he has no blankets, no mattress, no medical box, no gas to cook anything on. And we as MSF have been trying for the whole time that he's been there to try to get those kind of non-food items, very, very basic things in the winter, to him and his family, and we haven't been able to do that because of the situation. So it's really extreme in terms of the lack of very basic things that are required. And this is a member of staff of ours, and so for people who the general population of Gaza, things that are really disastrous at this time.
You mentioned the trucks. There have been more able to come through during the ceasefire, but are the medical supplies reaching you?
So we are getting some things in, but as I said, it's just not enough. So we at present are able to work, and we are doing sort of 10 to 15 burn surgeries per day at Nasser Hospital, which doesn't sound like a lot, but as I mentioned, it's just really challenging with the current infrastructure to be able to do those surgeries. And some of them are extremely long and complicated because people haven't been able to access healthcare, so they've now got infected, rotting limbs, to be honest, and they need a very extensive surgery related to war trauma that takes a very long time and takes quite a bit of expertise. So our capacity to quickly provide high volumes of healthcare is not there, partly because of the constraints with resourcing, but also partly because of the complexity of the injuries that we're seeing in these delayed presentations where people haven't been able to access any meaningful care.
So people can understand better, burns, you're seeing so many cases of burns. This is the aftermath of missile strikes, is it?
Yeah, these are all explosive injuries related to airstrikes, and that's the primary injury pattern that we're seeing.
I have seen videos on social media, posts from doctors who are working in the area, and they are pleading for some very, very basic things. Burn cream.
Yeah, we do have access to burn cream, and so we're privileged in that regard. The thing to note is that it's extremely difficult to move supplies around inside Gaza because of the security. So that's become a little bit easier during the ceasefire. But my understanding is that aid trucks were held up trying to reach the north. So the north is still very cut off. And the Israelis have tried to prevent people going north and have held up aid trucks going north during this process. And it's not, as I mentioned, because of the massive deficits over a long period of time, it's just not clear what the needs are and where they are. And so it's very kind of patchy for aid to reach the people that it needs to reach.
Do you think the staff that you have there will remain if the ceasefire does not hold?
The staff we have we have staff primarily now in Nasser Hospital in the south. Yeah. We aim to stay there to provide healthcare. I think none of us can know what's going to happen in the near future, and certainly the concern is that the situation that happened in the north, could also happen in the south if the ceasefire does not hold. So I think we have to take it one day at a time, but we have a very detailed and extensive security analysis on each situation. So we'll continue to work in the way that we have done for the last 50 years, looking at security. But it is very challenging, and nowhere is safe in Gaza. So it is really hard to continue to be in place and to continue to offer healthcare in this sort of context. And we know that we've been deliberately targeted throughout this conflict. So it's extremely challenging to make the decision to stay there.
I wonder, these are doctors and other medical professionals, but this is an extreme environment. How are they supported, mentally, with everything they see and are doing from day to day?
So, honestly, for our local staff, it's extremely difficult to provide meaningful support for the level of trauma that they've gone through. It's totally life-changing. And we do absolutely offer mental health support. We have psychologists available for them to connect with. And we train our international staff in how to support very traumatised local staff in the acute setting. But there's no way to erase what's happened to them. They've lost their homes, they've lost children in many cases, they've lost colleagues, we've lost the entire program that we've spent years building, the very intricate medical program that they had invested years in building. And so it's very hard to recover from that in a meaningful way. And we can provide all the support in the world, but unless this stops, there's no chance for our staff to have a meaningful recovery.
Natalie, can people listening do anything to help?
I think people, what I would ask people to do is to read and learn about the situation. I think there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation on this conflict. So I really urge people to identify news sources that are credible and really read a bit about this, because and it's one of the reasons that we're doing interviews and speaking up, because we're directly witnessing what's going on the ground. It's important as humans and as humanitarians that we understand the level of destruction and the man-made humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in Gaza. Nothing can excuse that. And we really need to honour our fellow humans by understanding the nature of what's happening to them right now.
We wish you and your team all the best. Thank you for your time. That is Dr. Natalie Thurtle, MSF Deputy Medical Coordinator for the Emergency Response in Gaza. It is 27 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A new report has found that the rate of emotional and physical violence inflicted and experienced within Australia's Defence Force is considerably higher than the broader population. It's resulted in a program being launched to try and bring those numbers down by offering support to victims and changing the culture within the organisation. The ABC's Evelyn Manfield has more.
Intimate partner violence is a major public health issue in Australia. Data released for the first time today shows it's even more prevalent among partners of current and former defence personnel.
What we were seeing here is that the rates do appear to be sort of really significantly elevated in the veteran and current ADF.
Sean Cowlishaw led a study examining emotional and physical intimate partner violence among nearly 9,000 current and former ADF members and nearly 1,000 of their partners. More than 1 in 5 current and recently departed personnel reported being exposed to violence themselves, but among their partners, that figure rose dramatically.
Particularly the partners of veterans, there was about 45% who were reporting exposure to IPVs.
Associate Professor Cowlishaw says it's hard to know why the rates of domestic violence in this group were higher than in the general population.
We can speculate there is reasonably high levels of trauma exposure, and we do know that when individuals leave the ADF, they actually enter a period of really high levels of sort of risk and vulnerability. So, the rates of mental health problems are incredibly high in this period as well.
While the data was mainly collected in 2015, the researchers are confident it still stands. Minister for Veteran Affairs and Defence Personnel Matt Keogh says something needs to change.
Any level of family and domestic violence is bad, and particularly in this context, it's completely contrary to the defence values. Having this data from 2015 is really important, but we do need to make sure we're continuing to get a good sense of the data and what the picture is, not just across defence, but across the entire country.
That is all we have time for this evening. Don't forget to tune in for First Up tomorrow at 5 a.m. We'll catch you a little later in the day.
And now the 6:30 headlines. Israel and Hamas have agreed to extend their ceasefire in Gaza by at least one more day. The announcement came minutes before the 6-day truce was due to expire at 6 o'clock. A Northland pharmacist fears the return of over-the-counter cold medicines containing meth ingredient pseudoephedrine could bring a spike in crime. Mangare's Lani Wong told Checkpoint chemists will also have to watch out for people bulk buying in order to make meth. Wellington Mayor Tori Whanau says her admission of a drink problem has led to hundreds of messages of support. She says she's getting professional help. And the inquest for the 51 victims of the Christchurch attacks has heard an international counter-terrorism expert say police had no choice but to take seriously the gunman's claims of multiple shooters. And that's the news.
Tomorrow after 1pm, the Come Together Band joins us for New Zealand Live, performing hits by Elton John, Dire Straits, Fleetwood Mac and more. Then this week's Critter is a native species of spittlebug named after the spit-like substance the young bugs create on plants using their own urine. Probably the wrong time to tell you we'll also have a delicious recipe from Kelly Gibney after 3pm. That's on Afternoons with me, Jesse Mulligan, from 1pm tomorrow here on RNZ National.
And kia ora, you're listening to Trending Now, and we begin with the detail. Spies, space and science form just part of the new domain for battle-hardened politician Judith Collins.